auto launch flows are like if you've dealt with process builder or workflows or triggers, this flow is a drag and drop way of building code that can move data around in Salesforce. And the part that you build could be potentially very similar between a screen flow and an auto launch flow. An auto launch flow is going to happen because you hit save on a record or because you data load a record. A screen flow is going to present a user a screen where they can click buttons, probably, and they're going to get that screen probably because they clicked some button saying, bring me to that screen. So I'm going to start with a screen flow because they're kind of the easiest thing to use. So flow is a place where you can build automated processes without having to turn to too much code. And it's got two different flavors, the kind where you give people sort of a wizard-like screen where they click a bunch of buttons and then something happens, or the kind where things just happen in the background as soon as somebody saves a record. So any questions about that? Okay. So first thing I want to show you is the variables, and it's not a thing. No, you build flows by dragging these little things on your screen, but some of them are already built in, and some of them you click this obscure button. You go to Toolbox, Manager, and New Resource, and then like, ta-da, there's more options. So we're going to start with one called a variable, and one of the things that this new piece of code-supported flow does is make it easier to make variables that organize data. So I'm going to call this variable best variable, or my awesome variable. And right now I could just say that I want it to be Boolean, which means like a checkbox, true or false. And I'm going to click done. And I'm going to then say that I want to build a screen called test output. And I'm going to display text on it, test display. And I'm going to say that I want to see the contents of my awesome variable in 36-point font, boldface, underline. And next, I have to actually put something there because a variable is just like a nickname for a place where you can put data. So I'm going to call this test assignment. And I'm going to say that I want to set my awesome variable to true. And I'm going to click done. Actually, I don't actually know what happens when you put a checkbox into text. Let's find out. And I'm going to save this as my first flow. I'm going to run it. Okay, there it is, the word true, because I said so. So there's a quick demo of what a screen flow looks like. And so when I was creating this variable, I was, again, as you saw, I had options for what type of variable it would be. And one of the things that we can also do is we can say, for example, that we want a variable, let's see, I'm going to call this one contact variable. And I'm going to say that I want it to be any sort of contact. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to change this, and instead of my awesome variable, I'm going to replace it with my contact variable. And you can see I have all this stuff that comes on every single contact in Salesforce. Like, there's a lot of fields that come with a contact. This is a brand new developer org. I haven't put any custom fields on the contact, but wow, all that stuff is just automatically included with contact. So I'm going to display that first name. Looks like all else, my big text and my underline. I'm going to change this assignment to instead say that I want to set, obviously it won't help if I set the last name right now because I'm not doing anything with the last name. So I'm going to say I want to set the first name, and I'm going to be Katie. I'm going to hit save, and I'm going to run it again. And now I see the word Katie on the screen. So those record variables are really cool because you can clump things like a first name and a last name together. And then, so it's a lot easier, you know, you don't have to have one variable here called contact first name and another variable called contact last name and yet another variable called contact email. You can just have this one contact variable, and you can put as much or as little as you like about a contact, its first name or its last name or both, depending on what you feel like doing with your flow. So that's pretty cool. And what is new is that we now have a way to make up our own variable types. I am actually going to exit flow for just a moment because I'm about to have to anyway, because every time you change the apex behind a flow, it's possible it won't show up as an option. So what I'm going to do as soon as I get this Zoom control panel out of my way is go to something called the developer console. And this is where people go to edit code. So I am going to create what's called a new Apex class. And I am going to call it, what did I call it over here? Greeting phrasebook. All right, so what I'm trying to do is I would like to be able to display stuff about different languages, like how you say hello, how you say goodbye, how you ask where the bathroom is, all that kind of stuff. Just like about any one contact, I want to know what their first name is, what their last name is, what their email address is, and I don't want to have to put it in a million variables. They all kind of go together about any one given record. So what I'm doing right now is I am just specifying that I am going to want to store all this kind of information. And so first I have to give the concept a name. Just like the other thing was called contact, this I'm going to call greeting phrasebook. And then I have to say, I have to put some sub-variables inside of this. And this is something you would have your developer do, although it's only 5 lines of code, so you could probably copy-paste it off the internet if you're an admin. And so I'm sorry I'm blasting through a little bit as far as the writing the code. Does anyone have questions about, I don't know, as I type, any questions right now so far? Because I'm just going to be typing and copying and pasting for a moment.
Not seeing anything on chat, and I think probably this is a little bit above most of our admin heads, but I can copy and paste pretty easily, so.
Exactly. It's just like you do with a complicated formula somebody else wrote. You just copy and paste and hope you don't break anything, right? As long as you're not like typing passwords into stuff, it's usually pretty safe. So in the end, what really matters is I am setting up these, okay, what's the already name I'm doing? So working from right to left, from most straightforward plain English to least. The first thing I'm doing is just saying, and each of these semicolons means that I'm doing a different thing. So I'm doing 3 things in this code. I am saying that I want subfields on this, one called language, one called how you say hi, and one called how you say bye. I'm then saying that each of those subfields is just plain old text. You saw in Flow earlier, I said I wanted something to be a text type variable. When people are programmers, they like to say the word string for historical reasons. It makes more sense at a very, very low level technical level, but it means plain text. So I'm just saying that these are all going, they're not going to be numbers, they're not going to be checkboxes, they're going to be text. And then public means that code outside of this code can actually set the value of these, which is important because it's going to be our flow setting the value. It's not going to be inside of this code that we set the value. So we do need them to be public, and that's just part of the Apex language. That's a thing we have to do there. And then what Salesforce did was what's new is that if you also add this little Aura enabled @ thing, that's the magic that as long as when you say public class, you have at least one variable. And actually we could even just take it out of these and say, no, this one doesn't count. We're not going to have this one. You could have other variables, but as long as at least there's one variable inside this class that says Aura enabled with an @, this entire class counts as an Apex defined data type, and it's going to show up as an option in Flow. So be careful what you said is Aura enabled public, because from now on they're going to show up to admins in Flow if you are a developer on this call. So I've hit save. All right. So got it. You are transcribing. Thank you, Michelle. So now I'm going to go back to open my flow. And I am going to go create a new record, and I'm going to call it a language. Well, sorry. First I have to say I want a variable. I'm going to call it a guide, because I call them like guidebooks. Doesn't really matter what I call it. And this time I'm going to say that I'm looking for an Apex defined data type, and it's going to ask me which one. And the only option it's going to give me is reading phrase book, because that's the only piece of code that I set up according to these standards. And I say done, and it's now showing up under Apex defined variables. There's not really much to it yet, but when I go over here into this assignment, I can backspace all that, backspace out which variable I'm using, and now under Apex defined variables, I'm going to click a guide. And it's going to say, well, that's not good enough. You can't just set the entire variable to something because it's got 3 parts. So which of these 3 parts do you want to set? And so I'm going to say, well, let's start with language. And I am going to say that the language is French. And now I am going to say, but you know what? The whole reason I wanted 3 parts was to keep them together. So let's set all of these things at once. How you say hi in French is bonjour. And how you say bye in French is au revoir. And now, obviously, it doesn't help much to show the first name, partly because if you pay really close attention, I changed this and I took away the part that said the word Katie. So if I run this and it's displaying first name, there's nothing here. It is displaying first name, it's just that first name is blank. So that wasn't very useful. Let's change this and backspace this out, because we don't care, because we're not setting a value for it anymore. And again, I'm going to click this. It's going to say, well, you can't just use the whole thing at once because it's a multi-part thing. So tell me what you want to use. And I'm going to say language : and then I'm going to say how you say hi / how you say bye. And maybe I'll put this in boldface underline, and I'll make saying hello blue. Oh. And I'll make saying goodbye red. And somehow I managed to boldface that too. 36, and I'm going to undo the boldface on that. All right, so I've set up my screen, I hit save, I hit run, and ta-da. So people who've done Flow, what do you think so far? Like, does this seem like an easier way to keep track of things that have something to do with each other?
I kind of like it.
Right? Like with 5 lines of code, you don't have, because in the past, you had to have a language variable, and then you had to have a hi variable, and then you had to have a bye variable.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like making a record variable without having to have a record in Salesforce.
Yes. Like if it's contact, obviously just use contact. If you're going to need the whole record in your database for other stuff, like clearly just make it an object in Salesforce. But if it's kind of just part of the flow logic and you really don't need it to exist outside of flows, it just supports flows, it's like an object that's a little bit less heavyweight than actually creating a real object in your Salesforce. So there are 3 things that this new feature does. And I think that's probably the biggest win. It does 2 great things for admins and 1 great thing for devs, in my opinion, even though it requires admin dev collaboration. But the biggest win to me is it allows admins to clump variables into variables with subvariables, so that you really can just keep everything nice and together, a lot like in a Salesforce record. So let's move on to the second one. Who here has used Invocable Apex before? Oh, okay.
This might be nobody.
Oh boy. Okay. So if you've ever built a huge flow that's really just soup all over the page, because it's got a million ifs and elses, that is what flow's for. But at the same time, there are certain things that might be about 2 lines of code if you knew how to do it in Apex. But you don't want to do the whole thing in Apex, because for the most part, you want it to be readable, and you want other people to be able to, other admins to be able to pick up and do the easy parts, drag and drop, and you kind of just want to have this one little hard thing done in code. So I am going to now put together some code that generates a random phrasebook. So first thing I actually have to do is I have to add one more flag to this, and making sure that at least one of these variables has this invocable variable flag on it means that the entirety of greeting phrasebook can be used as input or output to what I'm about to build, which is called an invocable method. And that's all getting very technical, and it's much, much easier to see what it does than to just talk jargon at you. So give me a moment and we'll be right there. But the other thing I'm about to build wouldn't be able to see greeting phrasebook unless I typed these extra pieces of code. If you're just using it to organize your own stuff, you don't need invocable variable. You only need it if you're going to delegate part of your flow to code. So I'm going to build another class. This one I'm going to call greeting generator. And I'm just going to copy and paste the whole thing. And you can see that I've got this thing called get greeting with parentheses that it has a label of get greeting, and all it does is say, okay, go do this other thing. And then if I look at the other thing, for the most part, it's just me having typed a bunch of stuff about French, English, and Spanish. The heart of the matter is, see this word random? That's built into Salesforce Apex code. So again, things that are maybe a little hard to do in Flow, sometimes there's really simple stuff that's just built in when it comes to Salesforce. So for example, this might, instead of me having typed everything, this code might actually be reading from your contacts database, your table, or a table full of the states of the United States, and picking a random state, because I don't know, you're doing a lottery drawing. And so the part that's short and nice to be able to delegate to code is this whole get random thing. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm picking randomly among French, English, or Spanish. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my flow. I'm going to leave the screen the exact same. We're still setting a value for a guide, but I'm going to get rid of this assignment block, and I am going to replace it with this little thingy, action, and it's going to say, well, what kind of action do you want to do? And I'm going to say that I'm going to start typing the word get greeting, and there it is. I've got get greeting from my greeting generator class. And again, I have to give the actual thing on the screen that I'm dragging around flow a name, so I'll just call it assign random greeting. Just remind myself what it does. It doesn't ask for any input, but it does ask me it's going to be sending back the 3 parts, either French, salut, salut, or English, hi, bye, or Spanish, hola, adios, as 3 parts. And I have to actually say exactly where I want them to go. So I'm going to take language and put it into, remember, my variable is a guide. This language here is what's coming out of the random generator. Then I have to say, put it into my variable. So again, I've got how you say hi coming out, and then I've got it going into my variable. So it might seem redundant that I'm saying how you say hi goes to how you say hi, and language goes to language and all that kind of stuff. And it is a little bit annoying to have to map these again. You'd think that I could just say, just take the output and put it into a guide and Salesforce could figure it out. For some reason, it makes me actually do it myself. But it's nice that at the very least, it's not terribly counterintuitive. I am just taking the time to take how you say bye and look for how you say bye. It's not the end of the world. So any questions about what I'm doing right here, that I'm taking something coming out of my randomizer and putting it into the flow variable that I created? Okay, so now I'm going to say when I hit run, please call my Apex, and when as soon as that's finished and done assigning the values to the variable, please display my screen. So I'm going to hit run, and I have French salut, salut. That's not so different than last time, other than that in the code I chose different words for hi and bye. And then I hit refresh, and I get English. And I hit refresh, and I'm back to French. And I hit refresh, and now it's Spanish. And I can just keep on hitting refresh, and it's completely random which one I get. So I was able to have a developer write me this fun little randomizer. And meanwhile, on my end, all I had to do from a flow perspective was go grab this little lightning shaped thing, go find, start typing greeting, click get greeting, put a couple of things in rather intuitive places, and use the exact same screen I'd always been used to building. Again, I'm still just, it's just red, coloring things red and blue over here. So questions about Invocable Apex?
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. And the thing that's new, you've been able to do Invocable Apex for a while, but your developer used to have to come up with some clever way to get you the language and the hi and the bye separately, and yet make sure that they weren't like randomly on different values. Now they can just send it back to you as one thing. It clumps together like a record, just like we were doing earlier, but it's a lot more intuitive for making sure that the data coming out of Invocable Apex actually feels like it belongs together the way that the code intended.
So how familiar are you with the unofficial flow site and the unofficial flow components?
I am not.
Okay, because I was going to ask, is what you did there essentially the same thing that they're doing with the unofficial flow components that they build? It's built on Apex, but it's invocable, so it shows up as an action within Salesforce that you can actually use in Flow.
Possibly, yeah. I think. Let me just take a quick look. Unofficial flow components. Unofficial Salesforce. Nice. Installable actions. Get distance between cities. Yes. Yes, this is very much this. But see how like these things say destination and kilometers and miles and error message, like the exclamation point, and then there isn't like a something else dot? So in this case, whoever was developing this example, they had 4, 5, 6 different variables.
So they did that instead of putting them into an Apex defined type.
No, sorry. Yes, exactly, because Apex defined type doesn't officially exist until tomorrow.
Oh, well, okay then.
Yeah, I got a preview org to be able to demonstrate this. And so their manager box is going to be full of all those variables, whereas when they probably update their documentation shortly, it will have like longer variable names, but if you were to look at their what variables exist panel, it'd be a lot shorter.
Gotcha.
And it would be interesting, actually, one thing I'd like to know is how they even managed to get all this information out.
Fortunately, they put everything on GitHub, so.
Yeah, okay, grab the source code. I'm sorry, I'm going to answer your question. That's right, we wanted to take a look at this. Salesforce project JSON NB API classes. That looks promising. Oh, it's all of them. Distance. I don't remember which one we were in, but yeah, Google APIs.
And it's okay. I didn't know if you'd ever seen these before. There's some really cool unofficial flow components that can really extend your use of flow today. So one of the ones I like most is the lookup. So it actually allowed me to do a lookup of a specific object type, so I could find all my records in a specific object, and then I could put a where clause in to filter it that basically said, give me all records in this object unless they appear in a junction object over there. And so it
Yeah.
allowed me to build a basically filtered list and then use that for somebody to pick from in a flow.
So short answer is I am 99% sure that unofficial flow components are indeed invocable Apex.
Cool.
And that they will be able to shorten up their code potentially as of tomorrow. So it'll be nicer for them, more maintainable for them. And although I don't know if they'll do it because everyone's been building stuff on them, but they might release version 2s of everything that look a little bit more like what I just did, where everything sort of came back as one chunk and you put it in the different subparts of one variable rather than putting it in lots of variables.
Sure. So for those on the phone or on chat, do you guys have any good use cases that you can think of for where this Apex defined data type might come in handy? I'm trying to come up with a few ideas, and I'm almost wondering if it's something like class schedules. You know, if you could make it for a specific, like specific college, a specific course, and a specific course number, or something like that, and be able to group all those things together for any of our ed folks. But anybody else have ideas on how to use this? I know I'm putting you all on the spot, and it's a lunch hour, so.
This is Don. There's things in my mind that's going, and sometimes they go down the wrong path very quickly. But what I'm thinking is some type of assignment logic, where right now we have case assignment logic, lead assignment logic, but just think of any type of object that would be assigned either randomly or through some type of customizable flow, kind of going down that path.
Interesting. Katie, do you have any other use cases for it that you've come across or thought about?
Well, one thing that I did, the very first flow I built was I built a screen flow that just asked people, it was meant to let people create new contacts and do some of the extra stuff like attaching certain opportunities to them in the click of a single button. I didn't want them going around actually clicking the new contact button. I said, here, just click this. And it only asks them for a name and an email address. And it doesn't even try to do any matching, actually. It just has in really big letters. You did check for this person first, right? And, the next button says, yes, I promise. And all it does is, insert a new contact record and attach some other stuff to it for them. But when I am on that first screen where I collect what they're typing, I have to put that data somewhere. And I believe that I may have had some intermediate variables where I was like storing the first name that they typed and the last name that they typed and the email address that they typed separately. And it might have been nice to just clump them all together into a single thing just because I am a little bit of a minimalist and it would have made me feel better in my life. It's really, I haven't completely gotten all the way to, from a pure admin point of view, what it's good for besides having a sense of very Spartan flows that don't have as much stuff on them. And also maybe for when you are doing these kinds of invocable things, it does help a developer make you something that keeps stuff together. For example, I wasn't actually sure exactly how I would have done this random language book if I had to try to send back the three parts of it separately, because I possibly would have ended up with the word French and the word hola and the word bye all jumbled up. from calling random separate times. And
Gotcha.
so it can be nice as the developer actually trying to do this functionality to know that you've got this one little box you can send everything back in, and it will all stay together the way you just as one little package.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, address is another one that comes to mind, making sure that you pull, you know, both the street and the city, state, and zip or postal code.
Yeah.
And kind of dragging that back and forth as its own kind of little.
Yeah. Yeah, so for things where you're kind of already doing it as part of a record that exists, like it's clearly going with a contact, you probably already had the functionality. But if you're doing something a little bit more custom, like it's not necessarily part of a contact, it's just kind of an address that you're floating around your flow, it might be nice to just have an address Apex class that you build out of, 8 lines of code, like we did in the first example, that just makes it easier to keep the city and the street and the state all together. It's a good call.
Makes sense. Cool.
Okay, so I have one more party trick to show.
Ooh, yay.
And yeah, and this one's a little bit more for the developers. So as far as an admin perspective, this is more, again, this is why I call it a party trick. It's just knowing nifty things you can maybe think of asking a developer to do for you. So I'm going to build yet another one of these. But there is this fun site called yesno.ooh, not workspace, WTF. And if you refresh it, it literally, that's what it does. And if I type /pound API, it has an explanation of what it's doing. Oh, now I have to click this. So if I go to a certain URL that I'll show you next, all it sends back is a 3-part piece of information. The first part is yes, no, or every 10,000th time somebody does this, maybe. And then there's actually some things you can do to force the answer. And so it'll tell you whether you forced it or whether you let it be random. And finally, it will give you a silly picture that goes with the answer. So I'm going to go to yesno.wtf/API, which is where you get the boring Cody version. And you can see that it's changing. Like the link to the picture is changing. It just doesn't show up yet. So a developer would actually be more interested in this than they would be in the page that we visited. Because what we're going to do is we're going to build our own version of that page. So keeping that in mind, that there are 3 parts: answer, forced, and image. And then the data is inside of those. I, as the developer, am going to go make myself a new class called yesno. This is just like our language guidebook. And I've got answer, forced, and image. That's not a coincidence. And this one I'm making more of a checkboxy thing. It's not really going to matter because I'm not actually going to put a checkbox on the page. And then I'm going to create yet another new class. And this one's going to be called yesNoGenerator. And you can see right here that yesno.wtf/API that I showed you with the boring results. I am putting that into my code. And then I am doing something over a protocol called the Hypertext Transfer Protocol. It's how the web works. It's how you get boring code from websites like that. And then there's this magic function inside of Apex called deserialize. It's called json.deserialize. And if I take what that website sent me back, and then I say yesno.class, saying like, I want it to be a yes, no, Salesforce Apex is smart enough to say, hey, wait a minute. That text that came back had 3 parts: answer, forced, and image. This yes, no class has 3 parts: answer, forced, and image. I'll bet this thing wants me to put this into that. That's what the JSON deserialize command does. And so, and then this just sends it back, same as our random language generator did. So that's a little overview of what the developer would be doing. And next, I'm going to go back to Flow Builder. I have to click back because I just created this and it doesn't know it exists yet. Open it again. So I'm going to get rid of both. Well, I'm going to get rid of this one. And I'm going to change this one. Well, not ready to change that one yet. I'm just going to get rid of that one too. Just going to take it out of there. All right, so I'm going to need a new variable for my yes, no. So I'm going to create a new variable. I'm going to call it the answer. And I'm going to say it's Apex defined. And now I've got two choices to set up yet another class with that aura enabled on it. And now I have to actually set a value for the answer. Again, I'm going to set that value with code. And I searched the word yes, and I found my get yes, no. I'm going to call it tell me yes or no. And I'm going to save answer into the answer. And I'm going to save forced into the answer.forced. I'm going to save image into the answer.image. And I'm going to connect them. And now it's got a value, but there's not much I can do because I need to actually put it on the screen. So I'm going to call this another output screen. And I'm going to go to the display text. And I'm going to call this display output. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the answer. And I'm just going to say I want to see the answer. Why is it invalid? Oh, that's right. This is an API name, so it can't have spaces. And I'm going to hit that. I'm going to hit save. And first, we're just going to make sure everything works. Okay, so we had an issue. And if I were to check my email, I would be able to see it a little bit better. But what happened is I forgot one more thing I had to do back in setup. I have to actually tell, so we're going out over the internet to somebody else's website and asking it for data and then putting that data on our screen. And in this case, it's a harmless little picture and it's the word yes or no, or so we think. But maybe 2 minutes from now, yesno.com is going to get hacked and start sending me a virus instead. And I'm going to get a virus on my computer from looking at this picture that's actually a virus. So that is why Salesforce won't just do anything we tell it to unless we actually say, I understand the risks involved. I am going to put in this, and I want it active, and yes, I really get that I could get a virus if I do this. So one more dummy check you have to do before you're allowed to run code that goes and talks to other people's websites and accepts candy from strangers. So now I'll run it, and it says no. And I'm going to refresh it, and it says yes. If I did it enough times, did it even get a maybe? Getting a lot of yeses. There's another no. So it works. Great. Now, how do I get that picture in there? I know there's a URL to a picture. So if I were to just, okay, I'm going to put another display text in here and call it, oh wow, what did I just hit on my keyboard? Oh, that's brilliant. All right, so I'm going to drag in, actually I can just go to this one and like hit enter. And I'm going to say I want to include the answer, and then I want the picture, right? Save it, I'm going to run it. Okay, no, I don't have a picture, I have the link to a picture because that's all that's actually coming back. So how do I make it actually show a picture? Well, let's take this, and if we know our HTML, we say image source equals and put a little bit of one of these around it. And let's see if that works. Does it work? No, it just makes that text. Okay, so I had to play with this a lot. And what I actually found out you have to do is we have to break it up into parts. Just the way that screen flows work. It's nothing to do with this new feature. We have to do a new resource, and we have to do a text template and call it show image. And I'm going to go to the answer, and I'm going to say image, and I'm going to put the exact same code around it, image source equals. And I'm going to hit done. And now, I'm going to go back, and I'm still going to hit enter. Then I'm going to, instead of picking that other thing, I'm going to pick show image. And for some reason, it's like the same thing, but this time it's going to work. I don't know why. You just have to put things inside a text template if you want an image to actually show up. So now when we refresh it, ta-da! We've built our very own yes, no. Thanks to the help of our developer, but on the flow side, there's really not a lot to maintain. It's really not much harder than the second thing we did. It's just the magic of what our developer was able to do. So that's actually why they built these things, was so the developers would be able to use that JSON deserialize magic command. But I thought it had so much more for admins besides just that this is just the icing on the cake.
So, but that's fun. I would love to do error handling in Flow with just somebody shaking their head. No.
Right? And in fact, you don't even have to, it would probably also be, with Invocable Apex, you don't have to be going out over the internet to get this stuff. You could have a couple of static images, and somebody could write you some Apex that randomly picks from your static resources. That would be probably a lot safer, and you can still have your flows with your head shaking.
Yep, we've thrown a couple of GIFs in ours. We've got one that when you're ready to submit a record, it's got a little cat pushing the launch button. So just pull them into your Orga static resources and be able to do it that way. And it's much safer than having to go make a call out to the internet somewhere, and it still adds a little bit of fun.
Yeah. So questions, thoughts? Your next project with GIF?
Absolutely.
Who here has a chance to work with developers? Yeah, in our team we've got both. We have a lot of solo admins with no developers on the call right now.
I am definitely solo admin. Don, you guys have devs on staff, right? Seth and Ryan are both developers. And you guys have admins on your team, right, Ryan? We'll wait for him to answer over chat. Yep, they have an admin team.
Yep. So, okay, Ryan, what are you thinking? Any excitement about being able to pass, since you're a developer, I can talk dev jargon, about being able to pass objects of your own, classes of your own making back to flows, and any excitement about Invocable Apex and it being a little shorter and sweeter to write? Anything to work with more Apex is going awesome. Yeah. So really, the heart of what this new Apex defined data types is about. I mean, it's so funny. They list it under flows, and yet it says Apex in it. And that really is the heart of what it is. It's a new way for people to collaborate where one person knows Apex and the other person knows flow. And you just want to keep everything tidy and where it belongs. And it makes it a little bit easier to get the data back and forth between the two. And then one bonus is, if you don't actually want to do Invocable Apex, you just want to keep things organized, you can even just use it that way.
So the invocable basically just means it's an Apex class that you can invoke from a flow or a process builder, right?
Yeah, you can. It's sort of like a subflow. Have you ever built a flow with a subflow?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a way of keeping things organized and saying, go do the other complicated thing. Only the other complicated thing is so complicated you don't even want to put it in a flow, you want to put it in Apex.
Cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. I totally want to learn how to develop just so I can do this now.
It is fun. If you are interested in developing, let's see. I highly, highly recommend womencodeheroes.com. Where else? So resources, Salesforce. Obviously there's Trailhead. SFDC 99 is fantastic.
That's David Liu's Apex Academy, right?
That's David Liu. And just his blog too has some good stuff. I should actually add Jeff Douglas's. If you haven't worked with Sockwell query, just think of Shakespeare, and you'll get it'll be the first result. Sockwell, how I query would be, let me count the ways. To me, that is my reference for if I ever am having trouble doing Sockwell queries, because Sockwell queries come into coding a little bit so that you can get data in and out of your tables and get it to code. But Women Code Heroes has this Cooking with Code series, and like all blogs, if you're a beginner, you probably want to kind of work your way forwards from earlier in time, because she goes on to talk about more and more advanced stuff. But if you just look up the Cooking with Code in the search, you're going to find all sorts of stuff that is that are beginner recipes. Oh, here we go. So like loops in Apex. How do you one by one look at each record that meets certain criteria? So I found that there is really great material on Kieran Jamison's Women Code Heroes blog. It's a few years old because Salesforce snapped her up to write for Trailhead because she was so good at it.
Cool. And it looks like you've got your own .com as well at Katie Codes.
I do, and mine's a bit of a hodgepodge because that's my life, is a little bit of a hodgepodge, just MacGyvering data from point A to point B. So I try to write about everything that interests me. It's not nearly as focused as Women Code Heroes. That's why under my research, I'm like, just go look at Kieran. She did it right the first time.
Excellent. Well, good to know.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any other questions for Katie?
I think those was really awesome. And Katie, we really appreciate you spending some time with us today and teaching us about this awesome stuff. It really means a lot.
Well, it means a lot to get to be with you all and meet you all today, so thank you so much.
So awesome. Well, thanks everybody for joining, those of us who are user groupies and those who are Katie groupies, as I'm going to call you. And Katie, we did record this, so when she gets me that recording, I'll post that to our chatter group as well, so you guys can rewatch it if you like. But we appreciate all of you guys joining, so I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day.